Okay. I believe we are live.
Hi, Austin. Nice to see you. Can you unmute just so we can make sure your audio works?
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Austin. Great to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Sorry that I came in right under the wire, but I made it.
No, your timing was good. Thank you again for joining us this morning.
Yeah, no sweat.
Do we want to, I guess, let folks in from the waiting room?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started in just a second, but you're in the right place. This is the Regional Climate Celebration for the Metro Mayor's Coalition Climate Taskforce, and we will get started in just a minute or two.
And Mayor Curtatone, are you back with us? I just want to make sure the mayor's here before we all get started. Yes, Mayor Curtatone does look a little different today. You can rename yourself in the corner. There you are, Mayor.
All right, guys. Just in time. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Well, it looks like we really have most of us on the phone or on the Zoom. So I think I'm going to kick us off and get us started. So hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Davis, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. It is so wonderful to see all of you and be with all of you this morning, really in a moment of celebration. And you know, how nice to actually take time to celebrate in what has been such a challenging year. So we are here today to celebrate, you know, the 5th anniversary of this really groundbreaking regional effort to tackle climate change. First, I want to take a moment and kind of recognize where we are and what the last year has been. The folks on this phone have worked so hard, and we've lost a lot, as a community, but I also think we've really gained a lot. And I think when we think about Massachusetts, we tell us the story about local control and these small New England towns that don't know how to work together. But in my experience, that's not been the truth. And this last year has borne that out in a way that I've never seen before. The level of regional collaboration and the way that you all have worked together to really think about kind of combating the current moment and the dual crises that we've experienced of the COVID-19 pandemic and the racial reckoning that we've all been dealing with, as well as kind of thinking about how we can apply that to our climate challenges, has been truly inspiring for me as a professional. I've been working on this for, over 15 years, and I have never seen the level of collaboration and commitment work together that I have seen over the past year. And so I just want to take a moment to recognize that and recognize the incredible work that everyone on this call has put in over the last year to really combat this horrible pandemic. The other thing I want to take a moment to recognize is that I think this will be the last time that we all gather together as our climate collaborative and have the tremendous leadership of Mayor Curtatone and Mayor Walsh. And this really idea of all coming together and recognizing the fact that climate change does not recognize municipal boundaries and recognizing the importance of regionalism in tackling this crisis has really been led by these true tremendous regional leaders. They're both so committed to the concept of regionalism and the concept of working across municipal boundaries to figure out how to tackle these complex challenges together. And I would be remiss if I didn't also just give them both my personal thanks for their kind of tremendous commitment to solving the challenges of climate change and working together as regional leaders. So I want to thank them both. I know we'll hear from them both, but also just take a moment to know that I know that they're both moving on to more exciting or other endeavors, but we will miss that commitment and leadership. So we're 5 years in, and let's take a moment to reflect. Back in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, we came together as a region and said, we need to figure out how to get prepared for climate change and how to combat our emissions. And in that time, what amazing progress we have made. All 15 of the communities have done a vulnerability assessment, have really thought about what are their risks to climate change and how can we catalog those so we know what we can prioritize together. As of this summer, all 15 of the communities are going to be green communities. They've taken those commitments and really made sure, stepped up at the municipal level and said, we're going to tackle climate change and GHG emissions. And, we were the first region in the country to come together and set an ambitious net zero target and stand up and say, we feel like there's a really important role for cities and towns in tackling the climate crisis. And look, now the state is following us, right? And setting its own ambitious net zero commitment. And the policies that we're working on the local level are informing how things play out at the state and hopefully soon at the national level as well. So today we're going to hear some wonderful welcoming remarks from Mayor Curtatone. Then we're going to take a moment to celebrate our success. We're going to hear from our state and federal partners from EOEEA and EPA. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with our municipal leaders to really delve in a little bit deeper about how we're tackling climate change. So with that, I will turn it over to our fearless leader, Mayor Curtatone, for some welcoming remarks. And you're on mute, Mayor. Can we unmute the mayor?
Okay, how's that? Is that okay?
Great.
All right, thanks. When Rebecca said we're moving on to exciting things, I think Mayor Walsh is. I thank her for that. And I have many kind words, but I'm literally moving. I'm in my car. I'm on my way to pick up one of my boys and bring him home for his confirmation. So I apologize. These plans came to me last second, but I did not want to miss this moment to celebrate with everyone on this call and all stakeholders and allies. Thank you, Rebecca, for the very kind words. And hey, I'm here for the next about 10 months. I'm not counting the days, but I think it's like 291. If you want to be specific. And I'm not only going to do what I need to do for my community, but as part of the region, it's an honor and privilege to serve with regionalists like folks on this call, our communities, this is not a region with vast swaths of land that are unbare. We are closely integrated one another physically, geographically, and on value. So, today's celebration, I think, is a reflection of our commitment to be bold and deliberate in acting today with an eye on tomorrow in terms of our values, not just as communities, but as the Alpha region in the Commonwealth and New England. And, as Rebecca mentioned, I know for many of us, after a year of COVID-19, even 2019 feels like a decade ago. But I want to take you back, as she just did, just a little further to 2015. The year that the Metro Mayor's Coalition, which I have the honor and privilege of chairing, launched the Climate Preparedness Taskforce in the wake of Superstorm Sandy. It was broadly recognized that if the storm had hit 6 hours later during high tide, Metro Boston would have certainly experienced extreme impacts. Superstorm Sandy demonstrated that really a catastrophic extreme weather event exacerbated by climate change could happen here. And I hope the notion of whether something could happen is long gone. We've got past that, given that we've experienced severe climate and weather pattern changes in a pandemic that we're in the midst of. And that caused us to think that, we needed to be better prepared and coordinate as a region. Once again, lessons learned, and why breaking away from a historic provincial and parochial past is a must to move forward to be successful. So a year later, in 2016, we committed to becoming a net zero region by 2050. And each municipality, as has been stated, committed to advance climate action in their communities. Building on the great work being done in many communities and supporting those just beginning to tackle climate change. So we made the net zero announcement just days after the 2016 election. Literally, as we were all grappling with what the election would mean for America's role in the climate fight, we were coming together as a region to set the most ambitious goal possible and really setting the tone for the Commonwealth. It was, I think we can all agree, a strange time, but really a perfect example of how the Metro mayors, cities, and towns have always been leaders and bold in these legacy issues, and in this case, climate change. So then after President Trump took office and took the U.S. out of the Paris Accord on day one, we held firm. And along with mayors and city managers across the U.S., Metro mayors reaffirmed that we were still in and committed to leading on climate action city by city and town by town, despite disinvestment and disengagement of the federal government. So we are here today to reflect on how we have used that leadership to really celebrate our local and collaborative actions on climate change within the last five or more years. So since making these collective commitments, and our communities have continued to make strong strides to enhance our understanding of climate vulnerabilities and build our capacity really to address them. So we've adopted and scaled and taken action to meet our aggressive greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. We've built clean energy projects and advocated together for better climate mitigation and adaptation policies and increased funding. And we've been a strong voice as a coalition and leader nationwide on the collective power of coordinated climate action. The Metro Mayor's Coalition and Climate Action Taskforce has played a vital role in fostering a collaborative environment in regional coordination. So I say vital because together we can do so much more than what any single city or town can do on its own. That should be common sense, right? But we had to do a lot of work in the many years to break through those, again, historic boundaries that have sort of encapsulated us within our own communities. But we've led through that. And we have used this platform to elevate critical topics and advocate for policy changes and investments at the state level. So some examples of this should be no surprise. They include, raising awareness of the need to shore up and invest in regional critical infrastructure, including, the Amelia Earhart and Charles River dams. Directing attention to the flooding issues at regional food distribution centers in Chelsea and Everett, and a critical infrastructure at job centers in the region. We work to amplify the need for a higher performing net zero building energy code and stretch energy code at the national, state, and local levels. But action at the local level has been strengthened since 2015 as well. It's important to point that out. As each of us have innovated and pushed forward, we've shared our strategies, our program designs, and our determination really with one another. And we've all given our efforts a broader voice by sharing them with our peers and our colleagues in the region and across the Commonwealth. So when I look at my own city of Somerville, I remember how daunting it felt to take, such an ambitious commitment to net zero. And, we didn't know how to get there. I remember mentioning in my inauguration speech, a few of them ago, and it got a lot of attention. And we had no plan, but we knew that the worst case scenario of tomorrow was going to be determined a result of our actions today. How bold and deliberate will we be? Will we be willing to lead? And as a region, we have. And I know you all know well the code of never over-promising and under-delivering. But net zero and the specter of climate consequences required that we abandon that approach. And we knew that we didn't know how we would reach our climate goals. But, the one thing we are sure of is that if we didn't commit to trying, we certainly never get there. So we got started, and step by step, we forged the way. In Somerville, we now have our Somerville Climate Forward Plan, which was the first plan of its kind that fully integrated climate mitigation planning with climate resilience and preparedness. Our Climate Forward Ambassadors program empowers residents to take action on climate change and engage more deeply in the planning process. In 2019, Somerville passed and is now implementing zoning code that incorporates both net zero zoning and resilience goals into the code, which allows us to leverage development to advance climate, sustainability, and housing goals. And the list goes on in my city, just as I know as it does in all of yours. Improve fuel efficiency in our fleets and energy conservation in our buildings, pursuing transit-oriented development, which in Somerville, including fighting for the Green Line extension, which will open later this year. And I thank you and your predecessors, your communities for that support, MAPC. Taking a leap forward with mobility initiatives ranging from bike lanes and pedestrian improvements to dedicated bus lanes, like communities like Everett led the charge in the region, supporting electric vehicle strategies. I mean, that unclear path stood at the heart of in 2016 has come sharply into focus in just a handful of years. So we all, as Rebecca has mentioned, deserve to take a moment to take stock of that progress, but not slow down. And as we take time today to celebrate, we also know that while we have laid a strong foundation, more work is needed to advance climate solutions, and solutions also must have in its focus, at the center of its lens, equity. We know vulnerable populations stand to suffer the most from climate impacts. And just as we committed back in 2015 to take on the challenge of net zero, we must commit to continuing that effort with a laser focus on equity. We have an opportunity to build momentum together within our local municipalities, regionally across Metro Boston, throughout the Commonwealth, national and beyond, to advance climate solutions that also advance equity and justice, housing affordability and livability, economic opportunity and access to good jobs, and the many challenges we all face collectively together. The pandemic has laid bare, as we all know, how systemic inequities have caused our most vulnerable populations to suffer the health and the physical impacts of the pandemic disproportionately. We know that climate change will be no different unless we act now and act boldly. So as we move forward in the path to net zero, we must ensure that our efforts are guided by the pursuit not just of carbon reduction or climate mitigation, but also of environmental justice. And something tells me that this region will once again take up the mantle and lead the way. And that's why I've been so proud to be part of it. So perhaps 5 years from now, when our cities and towns gather again in person, I hope by then, and much sooner, I expect we'll have a long list of progress to look back on and celebrate and being part of. But in wrapping up, I do want to say thank you to all my colleagues, the mayors, the city managers, for sharing in these regional commitments, to, as has been mentioned, our federal, state, regional, local partners on these efforts, especially to the staff and those of all the communities for their attention and dedication to the mission and work on climate Taskforce, but to the MAPC staff, everyone on this call, who's done an incredible job in facilitating and helping to foster that work. So thanks all for attending today's virtual event, and I look forward to the work we're going to continue to do today that will have that impact tomorrow into our fireside chat. So although I'm driving, I'm going to put myself in the mood and turn up the heat of my car so I get the real feel. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And, we know that this commitment we're so lucky to have municipal leaders, and I see so many of those municipal leaders on the Zoom that have made the commitment. But to achieve that success, we also need committed partners. And I just want to recognize, I see Mariela Puerto from the Barr Foundation. They have been such a wonderful partner in helping to provide funding to really move this effort forward. I see some of our state, federal, and nonprofit partners, and I really welcome them to the call. And I also really want to take a moment and thank, most importantly, the staff. We know the commitment needs to come from the political leadership at the top, but the work gets done by the staff on the call. And, these staff, we've been meeting now for, well over 5 years. They come to every meeting. They bring amazing ideas. And they, work so hard, I think, to really take the commitment and turn it into action. So now we're going to have an opportunity to hear from my fabulous partner in this work, Cami Peterson, to talk a little bit and kind of go over some of the biggest highlights of our successes and where we hope to go in the future. Cami?
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks so much, Mayor Curtatone, for those remarks. We're going to put up some slides so that screen share can start, and we just want to take a few minutes to share with you some of those accomplishments that we've all had the honor of being part of over the last 5+ years. So as Rebecca said, my name is Cami Peterson. I'm the Director of Clean Energy at MAPC, and I've had the distinct privilege of working to facilitate the Climate Task Force since its inception back in 2015, and the pleasure of working with many of you over the past 5+ years. My colleague Sasha Scheideroff and I will be spending a few moments just sharing some of these highlights and accomplishments from the Climate Task Force, and you can go on to the next slide. The pioneering history of the Metro Mayor's climate commitments and the Climate Task Force was mentioned by both of our speakers so far, but I'll do it again here. This is a celebration, and we're so proud of the work that we've done. We've come a far way in a relatively short period as a region. Prior to 2014 and 2015, while work on climate mitigation was underway in several of your communities, work on climate resilience and adaptation was still relatively nascent. Few communities had the time, the expertise, or the capacity to better understand their own climate risks and vulnerability, at least at a downscaled level. And even fewer had started to plan and prepare for it or to coordinate regionally. And that's what changed in 2015. We acknowledged that climate change would not stop at municipal boundaries, that the entire region was vulnerable, and that we could learn from one another and be stronger together. So in the fall of 2014, 2 years after that near miss with Superstorm Sandy that Mayor Curtatone had referenced, Boston Mayor Marty Walsh announced that we would prioritize working together as a region on preparing for climate change. The following May of 2015, the Metro Mayors Coalition convened at UMass Boston to sign a historic climate preparedness commitment, and we formed the Climate Preparedness Taskforce in order to better facilitate coordination and address vulnerabilities in the region's communities and our shared infrastructure. Among those convening and committing were the 14 Metro Mayors communities at the time, state executive departments, regional and federal agencies, including Massport, MWRA, the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, MassDOT, and EPA Region 1. The mayors and managers and those partners pledged to work together to prepare the region for climate change and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In 2016, as you heard, the coalition then reconvened and we signed a second agreement, this time focused on climate mitigation. Inspired by the Paris Climate Accord that was adopted 1 year earlier, the mayors and managers agreed that by 2050, the region would be net zero. And we committed to adopt or update a climate action plan and complete at least 3 new actions for each municipality from a menu of mitigation options by 2020 in order to advance toward the collective net zero goal. Now, after tracking the strong work from all of your now 15 communities, so nice to have you on board, Arlington, we have all accomplished these goals. We have met the 2020 commitment, and impressively so. More on that in just a minute. We are so excited to be here with you today virtually to celebrate that strong progress, while also acknowledging, as you've heard, that there is so much more left to do. Next slide. MAPC and the members of the Climate Task Force have been able to share our work nationally and internationally at conferences and events, sharing best practices and emerging practices from our region. The Metro Mayors Coalition's climate commitments and the Climate Task Force comprise a truly groundbreaking endeavor. We were one of maybe only a dozen such collaboratives nationwide when we commenced, and we were the first, as Rebecca noted, to our knowledge anyway, to commit to being a net zero region. This has enabled us to serve as a model to many other regional climate collectives throughout the country, which now number at least 24, if not more. Even here in our backyard, it's been fulfilling to see regional climate collaboratives sprout and grow, such as in sub-regional collaboratives and watershed-based organizations. Next slide. One of the roles of the Climate Task Force has been to provide and build capacity among those working on climate issues. In the first several years, many of our communities did not have dedicated staffing that could focus on climate work. We've seen that grow, another area where there's much more to do, but it has grown and expanded. And within that staff that have been doing this work, and a big thank you to all of you on this call and the others that have worked tirelessly, whether it's been your full-time jobs or whether you're also the economic planner or the facilities manager or a conservation agent, or in some cases, maybe all 3, We have striven to supply you and your colleagues with more tools, resources, expertise, technical assistance, funding opportunities, research, and programs to plug into it to help you excel. We do this through quarterly task force meetings, regular webinars, brown bags, workshops, trainings, and many other ways to build capacity. Next slide. We've also worked with nearly a dozen nonprofit partners over the years, a handful you'll see here on this slide, on a variety of programs and projects, which help increase learning and capacity of municipal staff. It also helps us to develop new tools and resources, cultivate peer-to-peer sharing, and elevate the issue of climate change. One early effort was to ensure that climate data for flooding and extreme heat was more comprehensive, more consistent, and better shared across the region. In addition to the task force priority of building municipal capacity, 2 priorities center on addressing flooding and addressing heat. The task force joined with the Trust for Public Land to create one of their first region-wide applications, the Climate Smart Cities Boston Metro Mayor's tool. In addition to capacity building and data development and sharing, the coalition communities have been hard at work on advancing municipal and regional goals, plans, and projects. And we've been doing our best to track that progress and are eager to share some more of it with you here today. I will pass the torch to my colleague, Sasha Scheideroff, who for nearly 3 years now has had the tireless job of managing the Climate Task Force and helping to lead us into new and exciting project spaces like climate resilient zoning and many more. Sasha has been diligently tracking activities in our climate matrix and collecting stories and photos from you all. I'll turn it over to Sasha.
Great, thanks Cami for the overview of accomplishments with the task force. And as Cami mentioned, I have the pleasure of working with the staff members of the task force on a day-to-day basis and have been blown away by the amount of work that you all have achieved here in Metro Boston. And I want to share with you a few highlights and numbers we've collected from each of the 15 municipalities. As Cami mentioned, in 2016, we made the commitment to become a net zero region and committed to taking at least 3 local actions by 2020. And I'm pleased to share that all 15 have completed their local actions, including adopting policies that advance these goals, including the Stretch Energy Code, municipal vehicle fuel efficiency policies, complete streets, and streetlight retrofits. Next slide. Members have also collectively taken at least 100 new municipal actions in reducing carbon emissions since we began tracking in 2017, including things like these electric vehicle pole-mounted charging stations in Melrose and installing solar energy on municipal properties in Boston. Next slide. In addition to municipal actions, the task force has worked together on regional strategies and advocacy, including building better and more efficient energy codes nationally and statewide, and developing a collaborative strategy for sharing emerging best practices for electric vehicles, including rate structures and procurement pathways. Next slide, please. Great. In addition to the task force work on mitigation and cutting carbon, the municipalities have worked to increase adaptive capacity and resilience in the face of urban flooding, coastal flooding, and extreme heat. All 15 municipalities have completed their climate vulnerability assessments and plans for preparedness and adaptation. This planning has laid a strong foundation for adopting climate resilient policies such as Somerville's Green Score and Cambridge's Urban Forest Master Plan. And many communities have begun to implement on-the-ground projects such as green infrastructure like Everett's Rain Garden. Next. Regionally, as Cami mentioned, the task force has worked to align data analysis and modeling to ensure that there's consistency across the region. One of the efforts was the early tool with Trust for Public Land, the Boston Metro Mayor's Climate Smart Cities tool, which has been used to incorporate green infrastructure and nature-based solutions in local parks and public space investments. In addition, the task force has been successful in securing grants to implementing climate resilience projects across the region, including 2 MVP action grants, one that provided tools and resources on advancing climate resilient land use and planning and zoning, as well as our recently launched Building Resilience to Climate-Driven Heat Plan to develop a regional heat preparedness and adaptation plan that integrates public health and equity. Lastly, the Metro Mayors and Climate Task Force have worked together to coordinate with state agencies and other local partners to elevate issues around critical regional infrastructure. This has included deepening the understanding of economic impacts of flooding at Island End in Chelsea and Everett, and really elevating that issue regionally, as well as successfully advocating to DCR in the state for resilience investments in the Charles River and Amelia Earhart dams in partnership specifically with the Resilient Mystic Collaborative and City of Cambridge. And we look forward to continued efforts to advocate for regional infrastructure across Metro Boston. Next slide. These regional efforts are further buoyed by local climate action, which not only provides concrete benefits to residents, but also pushes innovation and learning throughout the region. And I want to quickly highlight just a few examples of these municipal projects. As mentioned, the Island End River has experienced severe flooding in Chelsea and Everett, where a critical regional food distribution center is located. A couple of years ago, the City of Chelsea received a federal economic development administration grant for $3 million to increase resilience of the distribution center. The city has also worked closely with the local community and is in the process of retrofitting the area into a climate resilient park that will provide many benefits to the community. In 2019, the City of Melrose won a National SoulSmart Innovation Award from the Department of Energy for their work on Go Solar Melrose Big Roof Solar. During this program, over 350 homes, businesses, organizations, and municipal buildings had rooftop solar installed, including large-scale rooftop solar installations, like the one seen here on Highlands Congregational Church, where half the solar credits from this array go to Bread of Life, the area food pantry. Next slide. We also wanted to highlight the 2016 Climate Ready Boston report, which assessed Boston's vulnerability to climate change and identified a citywide and neighborhood-specific strategies to address coastal flooding. City of Boston created a unified vision of a resilient Boston harbor that is connected through a system of parks, beaches, trails, and open spaces for the entire 47-mile shoreline. This plan calls for 67 acres of new open space and 122 acres of revitalized open space along the waterfront. Additionally, the City of Boston has adopted guidelines to help private property owners and developers make informed decisions about flood protection for existing buildings and new construction, including building scale solutions on a variety of building types. Next slide. We also wanted to highlight the work that Quincy has focused on coastal resilience through the Quincy Adams Shore Seawall Project, which includes the removal of a previously deteriorated seawall, which has experienced damage under significant storm events. The new wall includes installation of anchored concrete level pads, new precast concrete seawall box, reconstruction of city-owned spares, and stormwater drainage outfall improvements. The finished project will result in an increased seawall height of 2 feet and supports ongoing efforts of the city to improve its stormwater system and mitigate against future storm damage. Next slide. Medford, the City of Medford recently completed a project on resilience hubs to assess Medford's ability to withstand climate events from public health and community resilience perspective. Through a 6-month community process, the city sought to answer key questions and inform the resilience hubs in Medford, including what do our residents need in order to be more prepared, and what do community provider organizations need to do their work in emergencies. This project places social justice principles, including racial equity and health equity, at the forefront to support health and well-being of all Medford residents. Next slide. So these community spotlights represent just a small portion of the climate actions completed in the Metro Mayors Coalition. Today's celebration also highlights the power of regional networks in working together to advance climate action. This is a quote from a Institute for Sustainable Communities report on regional collaboratives from 2017, which we participated in, saying Metro regional networks are new and powerful nodes within the established international and national networks advancing subnational climate action. And we have so much work to do, and we've done so much great work over the past few years. So I just want to say congratulations again to the Metro Mayors Coalition and the task force on our pioneering commitment and dedication to advancing local and regional climate action in the last 5 years, and many more to come. And now I will hand it back to Rebecca for our next presentations.
Thank you so much, Sasha and Cami. And we know that this regional work takes a lot of coordination. And so, I do just want to take a moment and recognize all the staff from MAPC on the phone, Sasha, Leah, Cami, and Lizzie, who do the hard work of figuring out how to bring all of you together and advance these regional priorities, and have been really key in making sure that we've had this truly successful regional effort. So next, we're going to hear from our state and federal partners. And I think one of the unique pieces of this collaboration is that from the outset, we've recognized that climate change needs all levels of government to work together. First, we're going to hear a recording from Secretary Theoharides. She's unable to join us this morning. I hope that she is right now in the governor's office, urging him to sign the next generation climate bill, which we've all worked so hard with our partners in the legislature to pass. And really, I think will be a fundamental shift in our ability to combat climate change at the state level. So that's what I hope she's doing while she's not here with us. But let's hear some remarks from Secretary Theoharides.
Good morning. I'm Katie Theoharides, Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. I'm pleased to be addressing the MAPC Metro Mayors Coalition at such an important time for this region and for the Commonwealth. We all know how difficult the past year has been. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way we gather, work, celebrate, and socialize. The pandemic has also presented extraordinary challenges to public health, our local communities, and economy in Massachusetts and throughout the world. However, despite these challenges, thanks to the Metro Mayors Coalition, Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito, and all of the great public servants across state and local government, we have been able to move forward many important objectives while addressing the global pandemic. At the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, we continue to make significant progress in safeguarding Massachusetts' environmental resources and taking aggressive action on climate change, while also preparing for its inevitable impacts in our communities. Building on a nation-leading record on climate change, we took a historic step back in January of 2020, when Governor Baker set an aggressive target for Massachusetts to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. To turn that commitment into more than just a target, this past December, after 2 years of intensive planning, Massachusetts became the first state in the nation to release a comprehensive study, our 2050 decarbonization roadmap. The roadmap analyzes strategies and pathways to achieve our ambitious climate goals over the next 30 years. We thank MAPC and the Metro Mayors Coalition for your participation in this critical planning effort. The roadmap report is the culmination of 2 years of science-based analysis and lays out the steps the Commonwealth needs to take to achieve net zero by 2050 while maintaining a healthy, equitable, and thriving economy in Massachusetts. Our analysis is clear. Massachusetts can achieve our 2050 climate goals. If we are smart about our approach and the strategies we select, we can do so affordably while maintaining a thriving economy and ensuring that we bring everyone along, especially our most vulnerable residents. The Metro Mayors Coalition has been on the leading edge of climate action in Massachusetts since 2015, when it convened to sign the historic Climate Preparedness Commitment, pledging to work together to prepare the region for climate change. The coalition also launched the Metro Boston Climate Preparedness Taskforce, and in 2016 signed a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and become a net zero region by 2050. Your continued partnership and leadership in these efforts over the next 30 years will be critical to meeting our shared climate goals. However, even as we work to reduce emissions and achieve these goals, we know that communities across Massachusetts are already confronting the impacts of climate change. The Baker-Polito administration is committed to continuing our work with cities and towns to prepare for the impacts of climate change and build on the tremendous progress we've made through our municipal vulnerability preparedness program. The cities and towns of the Metro Mayors Coalition were some of the earliest thinkers on climate adaptation and resilience, and some of the earliest participants in the MVP program. You should all take pride in the fact that all 15 communities representing the coalition helped build a solid foundation that has helped to lead to the program's tremendous success. Since 2017, MVP has awarded $44 million, with 89% of the state's municipalities enrolled in the program. MAPC itself has also been a great advocate and a partner for the program and continues to provide assistance to communities on their MVP projects, additional funding, and develop and test planning methods and adaptation strategies to add to our program. MAPC and the Metro Mayors have been truly instrumental in helping the Baker-Polito administration build our MVP program, and we thank you for your continued support. The projects coming out of this region consistently push the envelope and work on the cutting edge of climate resilience, and we are using these lessons as we continue to build on this program. For example, this past round, MVP action grants were awarded to 4 projects in the region that are proactively planning for the impacts of extreme heat. Some of the first projects in the state focused on this critical issue. For this group in particular, we awarded a $268,000 grant with Cambridge as the lead applicant for a project that brings together staff from the Metro Mayors Coalition to collaborate regionally on heat response and preparedness efforts in the urban core. The goal is to establish a heat preparedness group to coordinate regional planning and implementation while developing a science-based regional heat preparedness and adaptation plan. We look forward to seeing the results of these exciting projects. I'm also pleased to say that we are preparing to announce our next round of MVP funding in the coming days. We're also preparing to launch a pilot web tool on the Resilient MA website. This tool will be geared towards state agencies and municipal grant program applicants and will provide a preliminary climate change risk screening and recommended design standards for projects with physical assets. And we are currently scoping a statewide climate risk assessment that would expand analysis on climate risks and opportunities to the state's sectors and regions and serve to inform the next update of our state hazard mitigation and climate adaptation plan. We're excited to move forward with these new tools to strengthen our resilience efforts across the state, and I look forward to your partnership in supporting the MVP program. Additionally, our Office of Coastal Zone Management is planning to open its Coastal Resilience Grant Program to new applications in the coming weeks. We encourage all of our coastal communities to participate in this program, which has awarded over $19 million in funding since 2015 to support local and regional efforts to proactively plan for and reduce coastal storm and climate change impacts. As we've partnered to address resiliency challenges around the state, the scope and scale of need in our local communities is huge, and we know that we must work to find a sustainable source of funding to address these challenges head on. This legislative session, we look to partner with this coalition and with MAPC to elevate the importance of our work on climate resiliency and design a long-term funding solution that will support our cities and towns on the front lines of this generational challenge. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and for your continued partnership and collaboration as we work to meet our shared climate goals and ensure a healthy, livable planet for our communities and future generations. Thank you.
Secretary O'Harides, and I will note that we are joined by Maya Mansfield, who is the Director of Climate Adaptation and Resiliency for the state and has been a critical partner to the regional collaborative even back to her time at the City of Boston. So next we're going to hear from our federal partners, and Cynthia Green, who is the Deputy Director of the Air and Radiation Division at US EPA New England Region 1. And I just want to say, Cynthia has been a dedicated member of the collaboration since the beginning. And we're so grateful to have our partners in federal government at the table and really look to a renewed commitment over the next few years to be able to partner with us in really achieving our climate mitigation and resiliency goals. So Cynthia, a few words from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. And I've been honored to be part of this since the beginning. And we were a part of the original signatories as well on the Climate Preparedness Commitment. We've learned so much from this innovative cross-governmental effort and are very glad to have been able to be at the table with you. You're the leaders in community level climate mitigation and adaptation efforts, and we applaud your achievements and look forward to your continued success. As you know, President Biden has said that climate is an immediate presidential priority. And Boston is well represented in those who will be advising the president, as you know, with Gina McCarthy as the White House National Climate Advisor and John Kerry as the presidential envoy. Both are undoubtedly familiar with the leadership of this group, and you may all have personal relationships with them. We at EPA know mayors across the state and our country are on the forefront of climate mitigation and adaptation. This week on Monday, EPA welcomed our new administrator, Michael Regan, and we expect a new regional administrator will be named in the not too distant future. And yesterday, EPA relaunched our climate change website, so more to come on that. We are gearing up to implement several executive orders and presidential actions in the whole of government effort to combat climate change and environmental justice. Specifically, EPA expects to be working on regulatory activities to control mobile and stationary source greenhouse gas to mitigate climate change, and we expect there will be adaptation programs coming as well. So I want to congratulate all 15 communities and MAPC who have been a part of this coalition and for all that you've achieved. We look forward to being at the table, participating and supporting you as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And I just do actually want to take a moment to thank everyone that's watching along on YouTube. We have a bunch of you here in the Zoom room, and then we also have folks on YouTube. It's great, and I welcome all of you to the celebration as well. We're now going to move into our fireside chat, which I don't really know how you do that on Zoom, but a conversation with our amazing municipal leaders to talk a little bit about, reflections on the past 5 years and their goals for the future. So I ask all of you municipal leaders to, when you're ready to speak, unmute, and I will try to call on you and bring as many voices as I can into the conversation. So, we've heard a lot today about the critical role of multi-municipal collaboration in tackling climate change. And I'm wondering what role regional collaboration has played for you in advancing your local work on climate change. And I know Austin Faison, the town manager of Winthrop, was going to jump in and answer that question for us first. Austin?
Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thanks for inviting me to this. This has been a critical part of the work that I've done in my time in Winthrop. And I just wanted to point out over here to my left that there is a fireplace in this room. I've never used it. I don't plan on using it, but I consider myself part of a fireside chat officially. In my time working in the municipal sector, I've worked in Winthrop for about 2.5 years now, and previously I was in Brookline and Somerville. And in working across the region, it's really been crucial to me to look to the best practices of the region and really utilizing ideas of other communities, because I know I am not necessarily the most innovative person, but I'm good at recognizing good ideas that other people have already implemented, and then figuring out how to implement the same ideas and utilizing similar processes. back when I worked in Somerville, I had a lot of long commutes because my now wife and I lived in Providence, and I spent a lot of time on the commuter rail going up to Somerville. And for a period of time, I read the Thrones books, but one book that was really important to me during that time was called Metropolitan Revolution. And it's by the Brookings Institute and a couple of good workers there. And what it delves into is how regional collaboration on issues of government is necessary, and it's going to only continue to grow in importance in the future. And the reason why it is so important is because basically we can't do all of these things ourselves. And it kind of makes me pause when I was thinking about what to talk about today, and going through my notes in thinking about the past year. It is a clear example for the rest of our lives of how we need to work together on these types of issues. Public health does not stop at our municipal borders. And when you think of health in different types of contexts, climate health and the public health kind of go hand in hand with one another. So when we talk about Superstorm Sandy and things like that, those things don't stop at one community's borders. So we have to work together on these things. And, I tried to get Joe to read this book, and he has. I know in the meantime, I stopped working there 6 years ago, so he's had a lot of time to read it. But that remained important to me in working in Brookline, and more so in Winthrop. We are limited with our resources in Winthrop, and we have to look to other funding sources and other organizations to work together on crucial items. So one thing that we've been working on as of late with the MAPC and Sasha was a climate zoning resilience checklist. And what that is basically you can load in the FEMA flood maps and wetlands protections information into your building permitting software. And this checklist will come up based on certain permits that people will look to be pulling. And, we're not at the point that we're changing the zoning to make people build houses on stilts and things like that. But we're trying to put it in front of people that if they're going to be building a deck pretty close to the ground that may be impacted by a high water event or an astronomical high tide, they may want to think about building that on stilts. And if they're demoing a property and they're thinking of building a new house, maybe they want to build that on stilts as well, because the community, as much as we want to invest in things and try to build a way to manage all of this water, we don't have enough money to do it. And a lot of communities are in the same boat as us. And these homeowners, they're buying flood insurance, but it's a very high cost insurance. And some of these, their premiums would go down if they actually took some of these things into account. So that is some very important work that we did. And what we intended to do with this, and what Sasha's going to do, is kind of provide this checklist out to everyone in the region. So anyone who has these same types of concerns in their building process can just add this checklist. So the person who is pulling the permit is at least seeing this information in front of them and taking these things under consideration. Because just like with trash and recycling and things like that, you need to have it start being in front of people, because eventually the rules will change and people will have to build differently. This is to get a head start on that, in my mind, almost a decade in advance of when zoning is actually going to change to complement what's kind of necessary in these things. So that is something that is very exciting that we have in place now, and Sasha did some great work on that with us. Another great example of that that is really coming close now to being a tangible thing, because I know we're starting to interview people and receive applications for the jobs and things like that, is this North Suffolk Office of Sustainability. And when I first came to Winthrop, I talked to the MAPC and I reached out to Revere and Chelsea, and I said, I can't do a lot of this work with the amount of money that I can dedicate to this in Winthrop. And the reason why I highlighted it is that I can't pay part-time money, 18-hour-a-week type of money to someone who went to grad school and knows how to work in this arena. It's just unfair to them. And I didn't want to keep chasing people for a job that I knew they'd want to get out of as soon as they could get a full-time job. So I said, why don't we kind of combine our resources and see if we can have an office that manages some of this stuff on behalf of all three communities. And there was some hesitancy to start because there weren't really examples in the area of this type of regionalization happening yet. But luckily, we kind of kept moving forward with it. And eventually, Chelsea took the lead with it, applied to the Barr Foundation along with Mark Fine. And the Barr Foundation is actually funding this operation for over a 3-year period for hundreds of thousands of dollars. We got a lot of money for this. And I'm very proud that this kind of like nugget of an idea of something that we all were trying to work on. We just wanted to dedicate more resources to it. And over time, being a little flexible, working with the MAPC and working together, we came together on something that is going to be a good office for the next 3 years, presumably, and hopefully for a longer-term solution for our government, in that we can secure the funding either from outside organizations for a longer period of time or internally. But it's something that we're really excited about to work together on. And it shows that we don't have to do all of these things ourselves. I talk about dog licenses. We don't need 351 dog license applications in the state. We need one that 350 other communities can copy. So that's the way I think about this stuff. And it's been great working with MAPC on this. So thank you very much, Becca.
Yeah, thank you, Austin. And we are very excited about that North Suffolk Resiliency Office, and particularly given the vulnerability of some of those communities, I think it'll be really exciting to get that off the ground and see how we can do even more resiliency work. So one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about is to think about, we've made this kind of bold regional commitment together to becoming a net zero region. But how is that playing out in individual communities, and how is your community or your communities thinking about net zero? So first, I'd love to invite Mayor Fuller from the city of Newton to talk a little bit about what net zero means for Newton. Mayor Fuller?
Hey, Rebecca. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with our task force and fellow mayors and town managers. And as Rebecca said, most importantly, all the staff who's actually doing all the work. It's a particularly fun day. Rebecca, nice job on the timing of this. I'm sure you made that legislation pop out yesterday just on purpose. So we too, oh, by the way, Austin, I'm lucky enough to have a fireplace in this great mayor's office here in Newton. And I've always imagined that for the first time I try using the fireplace and I burn down City Hall. So I have not done that. So our action plan, which also the MAPC helped us with, definitely pledges us to that same goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. And we've got this really simple but hard strategy underneath it, which is to, how many words is it? 5 words: use less, green the rest. It sounds so simple, but it's surprisingly hard. So the whole use less side is the conservation and energy efficiency and all investments and policy changes we're making. So we drive less and switch to an AV or ride a bike or use LEDs. And on the green the rest, it's surprisingly simple. We're trying to switch everything over to electricity, whether it's, energy efficient air source heat pumps or induction stoves or EVs, or how we charge our devices. And why electricity? Because you can use renewable resources. And on my screen, Cynthia Green happens to be right in front of me. The combination of what's happening at the federal level and here regionally and in the Commonwealth with renewable sources just about to take off. We're at a really exciting moment here in history. Let me do real quick speed dating on some of the really concrete things we've done here in Newton. And I love that Austin says we try to steal good ideas from everybody else. But we have done one thing that I think nobody else has done quite yet. We've, even in the pandemic, when we were cutting back on so many investments and not hiring new FTEs, we just last week hired an energy coach. And we think this is kind of a new and neat idea. Like all of you, we've got to get our buildings switched over and our cars switched over. And it's surprisingly complicated and hard. So we have a full-time person here who will help our residents, our businesses, our contractors, our builders, our architects figure out how do you insulate, how do you install heat pumps, how do you install solar panels, how do you figure out how to buy an EV. It's a real concrete way to help people change behaviors. Municipal aggregation. We started in Newton Power Choice. We're maybe 3 years in. So we're up to 80% of our electricity use. Both businesses and residents are automatically enrolled in the program, and 80% is switched over to the equivalent of solar and wind. And yep, you can opt up to 100%. And yes, you can opt out. Like so many others, we've got solar panels now all over the city. We've got 29 different facilities, rooftops, parking lots. It's up to 40% of our electricity use in the city is now the equivalent of our solar panels. We clock it at $740,000 in savings. And like so many others, yep, lots of energy efficient improvements in buildings and streetlights. We're up to now 3 million kilowatt hours saved. All our city non-emergency sedans are now all EV. We've switched them all over. And the latest thing, we now have a preferred vendor compost curbside collection program. That's a mouthful. But the company that we ended up with had about 400 households here in Newton before we made them a preferred vendor. In 1 year, we're up to 2,200 households now composting. I'm one of the converts. It is so darn easy. And my husband does not let me put anything in the trash can anymore that could possibly composted. He's all over me. So the next really big thing is all going to be about an ordinance switching the city to require all new construction to be electric. That's a big lift in lots of ways. Last thought, what's our secret sauce in Newton? It's all about a huge number of residents here who are hugely passionate and deeply knowledgeable, who worked with us and kind of led us on the journey.
Thank you, Mayor. It was really wonderful to hear about those and all those initiatives. And one, I completely agree on the compost. For me, it's my 5-year-old son that forces me to compost every day. And I think you really touched on it, that, it is also the partnership we have with all of our partners, residents that are committed to sustainability that has been able to see such success as a region. Now I'd love to hear from Adam Chapdelaine a little bit about the net zero efforts in Arlington. Adam?
Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. It's great to be here today. It's dawned on me as we're talking about the fireside chat that we probably should have called it like a heat pump side chat or variable refrigerant flow side chat or something, thereby reducing our carbon emissions. But I think I could very much, fortunately or unfortunately, repeat a lot of what's already said, but I think I'd offer a few things. One, we're very excited in Arlington to be part of this. We've just finished our net zero action plan. Great work by our Clean Energy Future Committee. Great work by our staff, mainly Ken Pruitt, who's with us today. And I know you mentioned the importance of having staff that work so hard to make these things happen across our communities. And we think that this effort presents us, with an opportunity to change our community for the better. If we get to net zero, we feel like we can have cleaner air, healthier people, in a more equitable and prosperous community for everyone. And to get there, we have 5 pillars in our plan, which I'm sure are similar to the pillars that everybody has in their net zero planning efforts. We want to make our homes and buildings super efficient. We want to electrify heating and cooking. We want to electrify transportation. We want to help people drive less by giving them better options for transportation. And we want to try to produce more renewable energy locally. Our plan lays out a great framework for us to do that. Some efforts are already very much underway. Some of those efforts will take a lot of work in the upcoming years to get them started and to get them implemented. But we have people, both resident volunteers and staff members across all departments that are ready to do that work. We've done a lot of the things that have been mentioned, like community choice aggregation, retrofitting our street lights, electric vehicles. But I think the one big thing that I'm proud of and I want to highlight is the collective effort on the part of community to plan, approve, and now we're starting to construct what will be an all-electric 400,000 plus square foot high school. We don't think it'll be net zero the day it opens, but it's been designed to be able to achieve net zero status over time. It'll be heated and cooled entirely. It'll be entirely electrified. The only gas line that will be running into the building is for the Bunsen burners in the science labs. And I voted on the committee to cut that gas line, but I lost because the science teachers really wanted their gas-powered Bunsen burners. So again, we're just really happy to be part of this regional effort. We're working hard in Arlington. We're going to continue to work hard. And if we're lucky, I think we all want to get we want to get where we're going before 2050, and try to both have these environmental benefits, but also these quality of life benefits to provide healthier, healthier and more equitable communities across the region. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. And as I think we think about this net zero goal, I really do want to recognize the role that the city of Boston has played in being a leader, and I think kind of coming up with what's next. And so I do want to turn to Carl Spector from the city of Boston, who's been a great partner. And Carl, maybe you could give us one or two, what's next? Where is Boston leading the way? And what should other communities be thinking about as we continue to plan for this net zero future? Carl?
Well, yes, thank you, Rebecca, for that introduction. And I do want to say, before I talk a little bit about what Boston is doing, the success of the Metro Boston climate work is not just 5 years old. That even before all our communities got together with the MAPC and other regional partners to launch this effort, there was already an enormous amount of collaboration among the cities in the area, talking about what we were doing to get started, in the early days of climate action. And I know that I personally benefited from that enormously, talking with my colleagues from across the city and at across the region, and at MAPC and at the state and at EPA. And the city of Boston has really valued the work that that our partners, all our partners, have been doing, both in reducing carbon emissions and in preparing for climate. And that it's very nice of you to say that Boston is a leader, but and I'm not sure that was true 10 years ago, and it's certainly not true now, because there is so much outstanding work being done. as we've already heard in the past few minutes. So and thank you for all the work that the MAPC has done to spur us all on and to support our collective work. That what I think is more and more apparent, and I think we all know this, is that we've done a huge amount of planning and over the past 5 years, both in carbon reduction and in climate adaptation. And we're getting to work on getting projects and policies in detail in the ground, but that's where the work is now. It's all about implementation. We always have to do more planning, and we do it, and we sometimes collectively and sometimes individually. But how do we actually get things done? And I think we're seeing just fantastic examples of what's going on, across the region in both those regards. In Boston, we are, we're looking to put into effect, the real policies, across all departments, both internally and externally facing, to put things into practice. In our most recent round of funding for affordable housing, we had a requirement that all the funding of affordable housing that the city of Boston is doing now must be carbon neutral. And we just announced awards of over 600 new units of affordable housing that is being funded through the city of Boston, and those will be carbon neutral projects. In addition to having going comprehensively through our entire building stock of city-owned buildings to maximize efficiency through what's called the Renew Boston Trust program. We just finished, we wrapped up phase 1 earlier this year. We are starting the second round of about $20 million of projects of phase 2. And we are starting to do the design and planning and design for phase 3, just in terms of our internal building work. I love the idea of the energy coach. I'm stealing that one. Absolutely. We're going to steal that one. We've talked about, how do we get that kind of, support for our, privately owned buildings and institutional buildings. A lot of work is being done among the, privately owned buildings in Boston. But we want to make sure, especially for, smaller building owners, smaller businesses, that we can give them the support we need. And we're definitely going to look at that energy coach idea to see how Newton is implementing it. In the adaptation world, we are making that, a comprehensive piece of the way the city does its budgeting. A few years ago, Mayor Walsh, first I should have started by saying this, Mayor Walsh regrets that he was not able to join us today, but these are, it looks like that the Senate confirmation vote for his appointment as secretary will come very soon, which is great, but of course we're all sorry to lose him, but we're looking forward to the transition to Councilor Janey taking over as acting mayor. But in any case, we expect a lot of continuity, and Mayor Walsh a few years ago announced that 10% of our capital budget will go to projects that include climate adaptation, to make sure that we are implementing the plans that we have. And I actually think it will be much higher now than that, even under Mayor Walsh, because we are making it a comprehensive piece, a piece of all the work that the city of Boston does. We're looking to increase our regional collaboration. A few years ago, when we did our planning, our first round of climate adaptation planning for Charlestown, we made a point of inviting Somerville and Cambridge to participate in that, because we knew that if we didn't address a particular flood pathway that we were looking at in Charlestown at that time, that the water just continues right on. into Somerville and Cambridge, and it was great to have those two cities collaborating in our work as we're doing our another round of planning in East Boston. We've similarly invited Revere, because as many people have pointed out, the water does not stop at city boundaries. And we know the absolutely importance of doing that, and continuing to move the projects we are identifying forward. And we are very glad to have a what we expect to be a much better partner in Washington that will help us get we expect more federal funding. Mention has already been made of the heat planning that we're doing in Boston. We think this is really important. And in terms of we have a heat mitigation plan that we're just starting to work on, and it'll be take about a year. But in terms of implementing it and planning it, it's being very closely coordinated with separate projects around developing a heat canopy, a tree canopy plan for the city of Boston. It's being coordinated with a parcel prioritization plan when we're looking at what parcels of land in the city of Boston that are privately held that the city might want to buy. And that, of course, coordinated with the stormwater planning that draws upon the same green infrastructure that will be important in heat planning. And then finally, and again, this has already been mentioned, to tie our internal work with all the metro plans and other funding effort, other projects that involve multiple cities. Katie Theoharides had mentioned a couple of these that are being done by our neighbors and our partners in this, so that we have that our city specific plan is coordinated and integrates smoothly and seamlessly with the regional plans, because we know to deal with heat, it's again a regional issue. So that's just a couple of examples of the things that we're working on, and we really look forward to continuing to work with the MAPC and all our municipal neighbors.
Thank you, Carl. And I think your remarks really highlight the progress we've made in thinking about working together regionally. When I started this job 12 years ago, I think those ideas of regional planning projects and tying the regional plans together, would have not been something or a muscle that we had been used to flexing. And you've really highlighted the many ways that we're working on that now. And you really brought us, I think, a little bit to also talk about how we're incorporating resiliency into our work. And so I would love to invite Mayor Longo-Cohen from the city of Medford to talk about one or two examples of how the city of Medford is really thinking about incorporating resiliency into their planning and capital projects. Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I too have a fireplace in my office that I brought from home, but it's not as nice as Paul's. And I'm really excited to hear that Mayor Fuller, you went from 400 to 2,200 for your composting program. We are getting ready to pick a preferred vendor. So that's such exciting news. If your husband could maybe talk to my husband, prepare him for when the composting bin comes, that would be amazing. Thank you. I just think I want to highlight our open space and recreation plan that was completed in 2019 that will take us through till 2026. It was funded by a MVP grant, and we thank the MAPC for helping us fulfill that. It's going to be a role model for incorporating climate vulnerability and green infrastructure recommendations into our open space and rec plan. And it has a 100-page addendum specifically about climate vulnerability. It's actually already helped us guide work with regards to connective paths and about 10 open space and rec improvements that we're doing this spring into the summer. That open space plan will be a huge part of our first ever comprehensive plan that we're starting. So it's exciting to know that climate vulnerability will be at the forefront. We will have our comp plan overseen by our new office, and that's one of the biggest things I think I'll be highlighting. We've been able to merge our energy and environment office led by Alicia Hunt, who's on the call, with our Office of Community Development so that everything we do development-wise, energy and environment-wise is grouped together and will be an eye on how to make the developments as green as possible. And we've done a good job with the library and our police station. So that's one thing I wanted to highlight. The new office name is Development, Planning, and Sustainability, which we are excited to launch. We just launched that last week, and we're going to do some press on it in the coming weeks. That's led by Alicia Hunt. It worked out perfectly because she is a planner by nature and one of the leaders in energy and environment work here in the city and obviously through the state. So I was short but sweet. I know you only had 11 more minutes left, so hope I covered it
I really appreciate that, Mayor, and I appreciate the work to upgrade the parks. We frequent Duggar Playground almost every day in my household, so it's really been wonderful to see that. I think one of the things that we've touched on as a coalition is really thinking about how we're embedding equity and thinking about vulnerable populations in all of our work, but particularly in our climate work. And I would like to invite Town Manager Ambrosino from the City of Chelsea to talk a little bit about how he approaches equity and climate. Tom?
Yeah, so thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate that. We're certainly a community disproportionately impacted by COVID, but also a community that's sort of disproportionately impacted by climate change. I mean, we're surrounded by water on three sides, so particularly vulnerable to coastal storms. And some modeling that I've seen suggests that by 2070, 90% of our property tax base is going to be at risk of flooding. So certainly this is a major concern to the City of Chelsea and something that we pay attention to. And as we do that, we are really trying to prioritize and emphasize equitable outreach and engagement. And some of the things are obvious that we do, but I think important. So we always try to make sure that all our materials and our meetings are in multiple languages to make sure that we can engage as many residents as possible in the city. We try to take into account that we have a real digital divide here. So not everyone is capable of engaging remotely. That makes things particularly hard in this COVID era. And there aren't any great solutions, but it is something that we think about whenever we're in the midst of community engagement, is that we can't assume that everyone has the digital access that more advantaged individuals have. We try to include environmental justice groups, particularly green roots, as co-managers, co-project managers in a lot of projects so that we can really reach the community in a different way. And when possible, it's not always possible, but when it is possible, we actually try to compensate members of our minority community to contribute to engagement with their life experiences. And so in all those ways, we try to ensure that, engagement is equitable. And I'd say as we think about how do we recover from COVID and think about focusing on green infrastructure, green energy projects, we're trying to do that in a way that has an equitable lens on it. So, like Newton and other communities, we're deploying municipal aggregation with a renewable energy component because we think that's going to benefit some of our economically disadvantaged residents. And we're actually working with Green Roots on this microgrid project that would protect our most vulnerable assets and our most vulnerable residents from natural disasters, if that were to occur, and ensure that they would have continued electricity. And last thing I'd say is, and Austin mentioned this office of, this North Suffolk Office of Resilience and Sustainability, which we're very grateful to the Bar Foundation for supporting financially, helping us launch. And I do want to give a shout out to the three, I know there's three members of my staff on this call: Public Works Commissioner Fidel Maltez, Housing and Community Development Director Alex Train, and Senior Project Manager Ben Kears. They worked very hard to launch this office. And but the important thing about it is that the first order of business for that office is to conduct a racial equity assessment so that we can be sure that the projects on which that office is going to focus will be climate projects with the maximum equity impact. And so I'd say we are trying to do this work in an equitable way, and those are some of the examples that come to mind.
Thank you. And I think that really kind of leads us into our next question is, as we're thinking about recovery, we have to think about how do we have an equitable and sustainable recovery? And we are really poised at this unique moment with an influx of potential federal dollars and really kind of, I think, a reflection point of thinking about where do we want to go from here. And so I would love to turn to Mayor Paul Broder from the city of Melrose to talk a little bit about his thoughts on those topics. Mayor Broder?
Thank you. It is great to see everyone. It is particularly good to see Cynthia Green. Cynthia, have never met in person, but it must be great to see the EPA back in business and doing great work.
It is.
It really matters who is at the top of the food chain, and some of the changes that we're seeing and that we're looking forward to, we're really excited about. And I'm sure I don't speak for myself. Or I don't speak just for myself. And to the extent that this gets back to our friends in the legislature, certainly want to thank Speaker Mariano and Senate President Spilker for following through on a commitment they made late last session, and they renewed this session to get the climate bill on the governor's desk. And I think we all look forward to seeing the governor sign that without vetoes, and hopefully we move forward on that front. So here in Melrose, I really will try to be brief because it's not a chat if we're not really exchanging ideas. But if there's one thing I could say about how to do this work and do it well, it is hire a pro and let them create a strategic vision for what your community is going to be able to do. So I've been in office about a year and a half or 10 years in COVID time, and I'm really the third mayor or the fourth mayor, depending on how you count, that has made this commitment. Mayor Dolan started out making the commitment to be a green community and going forward with, when he was a metro mayor, to committing to net zero, and we've really built from that. And it's interesting because when we started doing this as a community, it wasn't part of the political dialogue, quite frankly. And in the election that I made it through about a year and a half ago, there was a whole forum on economic and environmental justice and sustainability and environmental concerns. And that really is a sea change that comes from the leadership that this group has shown way before I got here, that's for sure. And I am excited to build on their success and to be partners. So much has already been said that is terrific. Things like, copying what other people do, 100% a good idea. There are so many good ideas out there, not just within Massachusetts, but across the country. And really, mayors and local CEOs, sometimes, if there is a hiccup in leadership at the federal or state level, we need to continue that momentum. And this really does the influx of federal money, both with the American Recovery Plan and hopefully an infrastructure bill coming shortly to complement that, really creates opportunities. And if you're strategic, you're ready. And so I use as an example, we have coming up in Melrose a need to replace our HVAC at our senior center. The timing is somewhat fortuitous. So not only are we prepared to do good work to make sure to really focus on air quality and temperature, which leads into both public health, dealing with heat sinks and heat centers, because we really don't have cooling centers in Melrose right now. We have very old public building stock, but we're also going to fully electrify that system. And these resources that are coming our way are ways that we can make that happen. So rather than go into our history, which quite frankly is tremendous, with a really exciting first in the Commonwealth EV charging concept that I hope spreads like wildfire. Certainly the aggregation that y'all have talked about is something that we've embraced in Melrose for quite some time. But programming into kind of like what Medford's doing, every decision you make as a municipality, and that includes your CIP work, your capital work, and that kind of visioning that you do, making sure that, in my case, our sustainability manager has a seat at the table and growing that voice. That is how we are going to make the best long-term investments with the resources that are coming. So if you don't have someone like that, if you have the opportunity to add dedicated FTEs to the effort, it really does pay off in the long run. You will see a tremendous bang for your buck. I can't stress that enough. And if you don't have the ability to do that, particularly as these new funding opportunities become available, don't be shy about reaching out, because we're all in a little bit of a different place. And there are some communities that might not be able to turn that on right now, but there are plenty of resources out there. This is very much a partnership. So to the extent that folks need help, want to exchange ideas, jump right in. Do not be shy about calling colleagues, particularly the pros on the call. You call me, I'm going to refer you to Martha Grover, but I'm happy to take that call and make that happen for you also. Thanks for the opportunity and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mayor. And, I'm going to take this moment to thank everyone. It's been, I think, really wonderful, particularly after this hard year, to kind of just take an hour and a half and reflect and take a moment for celebration. And, it's really tremendous to kind of take that time to think about what we've all accomplished together. And I know we're kind of poised at this new decade. It's really going to be a critical decade in our clean energy and climate transition. And I'm just so grateful to have such an amazing group of leaders and staff at all levels of government and, with our friends in the private and nonprofit sectors to think about how we as a region can really meet these ambitious targets and goals that we've set. So with that, I will say thank you all and have a wonderful day. And I look forward to continuing to work on these critical climate issues with all of you. Thanks.